committee to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. No one has approached either the clerk or myself relative to public comments, so we will move on to the minutes from the August 13th meeting. What are your wishes? They were in the packet. Chair Gibbs?
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. We have 5 members present here and one member, Supervisor Reynolds, present virtually. We'll move on to operational functions, review of administrators' proposed new expanded positions for the 2026 budget. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. There is a memo in your packet that summarizes the new position requests, so I won't go through that in detail, but essentially we have a total of what I'll call 3 new positions, although they're all exact. Funding is provided, I should say. The additional expansion is from a 0.75 to a 1.0 within the Veteran Service Office, and I alluded to in the memo, through the budget building process, we do have a number of positions that we're going to proceed with including in the budget, but not providing any additional funding. So of course, any of those positions will remain unfilled absent funding being allocated. But each of the, in addition to the memo, each of the positions is supported with some additional documentation relative to the positions or requests. The exception to that is position number 4, which is the essentially transferring a position, a 1.0 public health coordinator position based on the direction from the Health and Human Services Committee. And I do anticipate bringing back to that committee at its next meeting a job description that will largely be built off of the job description that exists from La Crosse County and mirroring it to an existing coordinator position within the health department. Funding will be provided for that position through the defunding of an already existing nurse manager position at the health department. So with that, happy to take any questions on the new position requests. In terms of process, this is consistent with the process that's spelled out in section 4.20 of the Code of Ordinances.
Are there any questions for the administrator relative to the positions? Any questions? If not, what are I think you're looking for our concurrence in the new positions for building the 2026 budget? Are you not?
That is correct, and that is the process spelled out in section 4.20. Of course, ultimately through the budget adoption, the full board would have the opportunity to weigh in on each of these position requests. As alluded to in the memo, we did receive more position requests than these. These are the positions that I'm recommending for ultimate inclusion in my proposed budget for the reasons set forth in the memo.
How many additional positions were requested? No.
I can pull that up. There were 3 additional position requests that were requested, but I had not moved those forward.
Okay, any questions for the administrator? If not, a motion would be in order. Chair Gibbs?
Make a motion to approve the recommendations to build into the 2026 budget, the positions as detailed, and funding as appropriate, as spelled out in the memo.
That would be for the new and expanded / reclassified positions.
Correct.
Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Hart. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. All members are now present. Consideration of whether or not to take formal position or offer comment regarding the potential designation of Eastgate Hall as a local historic landmark in the city of Wausau. There were three issues that we were looking at. One was whether or not there could be a partial designation, whether the designation would impact future improvements such as air conditioning or others, and whether or not there was a significant increase in insurance relative to designating it as a historic building. Administrator Leonard.
Perfect. Those were the three questions. So with respect to parcel designation, the short answer is yes. In fact, you have a couple of sites that the county owns that already have parcel designation. They are set forth on page 2 of your memo, specifically these various portions of stone gates at the Marathon Park facility. With respect to upcoming maintenance, you are correct. The primary, I guess the largest project that could be considered for Eastgate Hall in terms of additional renovations would be adding air conditioning to that facility. Of course, that's not on the, it's certainly not in the capital funding plan for 2026. If that was requested and to be moved forward, we would have to navigate the city's process for that. But that's not unlike some of the other facilities that have currently received that designation. And lastly, with respect to insurance, Jamie Alberti from Corporation Counsel's office did look into that. There would be a significant increase if the county sought to insure those buildings to provide for historic, I should say, provide for replacement consistent with their historic character. Of course, that's not required, and I wouldn't recommend you do that, because if the buildings are fundamentally destroyed, I think you'd want to leave yourself open to figure out how exactly you wanted to rebuild those facilities, if you wanted to do that at all.
So are there any questions of the administrator relative to the designation? If not, the Park Commission recommended a partial designation. What are your wishes? Supervisor Poole.
I would just rather not take a position on this and let it go.
Is there any other discussion? My only concern about not taking a position is that the issue is before the city's Historic Landmark Commission, and without us weighing in, the potential would be for them to list the entire building, which may or may not have an impact on us. And if the desire would be to deviate or not to go with the listing of the entire building, it would be important for us to perhaps share that sentiment or position with the city.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just to elaborate on that, I think I wasn't at the Park Commission meeting, but I think you largely summed up the rationale that I understand to have been the rationale of the commission. Eastgate Hall is a large facility, but the stone wing of Eastgate Hall is really the portion that has the historic designation, or I should say the historic significance, that was built during the Depression era, as I understand it, with Civilian Conservation Corps. It's also the site where Martin Luther King Jr. spoke quite a number of years ago. So I think that was the reason for the partial designation as opposed to the full facility.
Supervisor Poole.
That's a good point.
I'm sorry?
That's a good point.
Chair Gibbs.
I would make a motion that we follow the recommendation of the Parks Commission and recommend that a partial designation of that facility be designated as a historical landmark,
Is there,
but not insure it as replacement for.
is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lemmer. Any discussion on that motion? If not, all those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously, and I think Administrator Leonard, you will then communicate that to the city's Historic Landmarks Commission.
I believe I'm going to designate Jamie Polly to do that. She's offered to attend the meeting.
All right. And she's not present.
It's the perfect time to designate someone to attend a meeting.
All right, 5.3, discussion of the annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committee, including review of the mandatory discretionary programs and rates and fees. And I know we have invited guests to be with us today. Administrator Leonard.
Sure, I'll tee it up. This was a request, I understand, from Vice Chair Marshall to have a presentation from North Central Healthcare to talk about how North Central Healthcare sets fees and some of the considerations that they have in doing so. Because as you well know, we, as county staff, we are having our budget meetings with departments, and fee schedule increases are a significant part of every one of those budget meetings based on the direction we've received from this body as well as the full county board. So Gary Olson and Jason Hake are here from North Central Healthcare to kind of discuss how North Central Healthcare, give a general overview of some of its revenue streams and how the setting of fees, at least in some important respects, are different than some of the considerations that we might have in other county departments based on, again, those specific revenue streams and the payers. So if you guys want to sit there, you can, and I can scroll. There is a memo in your packet on page 40 that Jason provided to the executive committee some time ago with respect to the fee schedule, but also then the fee schedule is included in that as well.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to come and discuss our fee schedule. I'm going to let Jason kind of take this, and I'll just tee it up just a little bit. This is something I will say, before I started in 2022, they hadn't raised the fees for quite a while. We did raise the fees in 2022. Because of us being healthcare, Jason's going to explain some of the rules and regulations that go with this as we look at the fees. But we do this every year. So the memo that you have there is the memo that Jason wrote in December, and we look at these every year as we set the fees annually. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason so he can kind of go through the process.
Thank you. Much like the county, we review our fees at budget time, but we take ours for approval a little bit later in the process. And that's really due to when we get our fees set. So what our fees are is not necessarily what we're going to get paid. A lot of our fees are set by Medicaid or commercial insurance or county-specific programming, and fees could be reimbursed at a certain rate. We could set it for what we want, but we might get paid a much lower rate, whether it's Medicaid, commercial insurance, or a county-specific program. So we take ours later in the year because we like to wait for some of our Medicaid rates to be set. The timing works out well for us because we contract with multiple counties for services, and with those counties, we contract at the Medicaid rate. So that really affects our hospital rates. We contract with about 30 counties to utilize our hospitals. and we charge them the Medicaid rate. And administratively, that's much easier for us. Doesn't necessarily mean we're charging the county, but we might be taking an out-of-county individual and then charging their Medicaid for that payment. So there's no balance billing to the outside county. So our rates are very unique. Like I said, these are our gross charges included in the fee schedule. Many of our rates are set by Medicaid or commercial payers. We contract with the Aspirus Network Insurance. They have, I believe, 13 outside commercial insurance contracts. So we are credentialed with each one of those, but Aspirus actually negotiates those rates on our behalf through the network. So through economies of scale, they're able to negotiate higher rates for us. We're not having to administratively negotiate with 13 different insurance contracts. So really our rates are set and limited in scope in some aspects. But like Gary said, we do look at increasing our rates on an annual basis. Because we are healthcare, if we do increase our rates higher than the prior year's CPI, we have to post what those rate increases would be. So that might be, and that's for our organization as a whole. So we can increase some rates above CPI, some lower, but as long as our total rate increase doesn't exceed the prior year CPI, we don't have to post for it. So if you look at our rates in here, you will see there's a variance. Many of them increased by 2%. Some of them increased smaller amounts. Some didn't increase at all. And the reason for that is we were trying to keep that under that CPI amount, so you didn't have to go through that approval process. We do like to increase our rates just to keep up with inflation. Although we may not get paid for it, we still want to make sure that those rates represent what the actual cost of doing business is. We do post our rates on our website, just like other healthcare providers. And we do have a price transparency tool on our website. So if anyone from the public wanted to go out, they could select their insurance, put in their insurance information, and then get a projection or an estimate of what it would cost for them to seek services at North Central Healthcare. Like it states in the memo, we do not deny anyone service. So it does not matter if you have an ability to pay or not. Our mission is to serve everyone in the community. So whether or not you have a payer or not, we serve all individuals. And then we do have a sliding fee scale or an ability to pay. So if somebody does come in and does not have insurance or does have insurance, we will go through a financial process and determine what their ability to pay is, and then adjust that based on the formula that we have set. So we will see that as a deduction or like a write-off in our financials, which is called charity care. So it's a very high-level process. We could dive into a lot of details if you want, but are there any questions that anyone has?
I would have a question relative to, there are a good number of areas where you are not increasing the fees. Are the fees sufficient to cover your cost?
Yeah, in the fee schedule where you see the 0% increase, many of those fees we do not get paid for, or we very rarely bill. So like I said, a lot of these fees might be expenses that for somebody that might be in the hospital, but when we bill Medicaid, we get paid a daily rate. So we still want to capture what the cost is of providing, say, an x-ray or labs. We bill it. We don't get paid it. We just get paid the lump sum of the daily rate. So again, we were kind of strategic with what do we increase, what do we keep flat as a zero so that we're not exceeding that CPI amount.
Supervisor Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think you answered this, but just to be clear, if your rates go up and Medicaid does not reimburse at that same rate, you don't deny anybody, you wouldn't maybe stop accepting Medicaid patients because the rate is not matching up. Do you have a waiting list then for, I think our census went down when we did the rebuild, so do you ever have a waiting list of patients wanting to come in, say, to Mount View? I'm thinking of Mount View and not verbalizing that, but now I will. Can the customer come in when they want to come in, I guess is my question.
Yeah, so at Mount View, we specifically, we might have a waiting list depending on what unit they need to get seen on. We do have capacity to go up to 160 beds. We're at about 117, 118 today. So there might be a short waiting list to get on a certain unit, but there might be capacity on another unit. And the reason we have that is we might not necessarily have this capability of expanding and opening a whole new unit for 1 or 2 individuals. So we're trying to staff it based on what works operationally. Our biggest challenge right now is the staffing of the facility. The hospitals, we do not have a waiting list, but census has been pretty full there. And outpatient, we do have a short waiting list, really just due to having a challenge of finding therapists based on the demand that we're seeing. So Medicaid is of course, it's our largest payer source, largest payer at North Central Healthcare, and it's in many cases our best payer as well. Our highest rates in the hospital are for Medicaid. Our community treatment or CCS program is in theory 100% funded, and that would be through billing and then through an end of the year reconciliation process. So it's actually pretty advantageous for us to seek Medicaid individuals. And we've seen a huge increase in Medicaid rates at the nursing home. So you're seeing in the community and in the state a lot more nursing homes taking Medicaid individuals, which has actually kind of hurt our census. So again, we don't have a huge waiting list just because we're seeing a lot more skilled nursing facilities taking Medicaid individuals.
If I could add one thing to your question about census, to Jason's point on the hospitals, the inpatient psychiatric hospital, managing census is a big part of how North Central manages its financials. It's important to note that if someone needs inpatient care in North Central from particularly the 3 counties, Lincoln, Langlade, Marathon, if there is one not room within the inpatient hospital, or 2, the individual, their specific characteristics are such that maybe North Central isn't the best suited location for that care, there are other places. We have out-of-county placements that, if someone needs to go to Winnebago for safety reasons, there's not a denial of care. But trying to maximize that census is not only the best thing for the individual patient, if we can keep them local, but it's also extremely important to the financials. And Jason and Gary have done a good job of, if you look at the executive committee packets for the North Central Healthcare Executive Committee, we get reports every meeting on, okay, where's census? Because again, prioritizing care for the member counties is one of the primary considerations, but also making sure it's financially viable.
Supervisor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you go into detail on what would be communities or county-specific programming that Marathon County has? And then I have a follow-up question.
County-specific as far as what's
Services.
So we have Mount View Care Center would be a county-specific, and then within our financials, we do break it out by, we've got shared services, and then we've got county-specific. So the county-specific would be outpatient services, community treatment for both adult and youth, We've got the sober living facility. Let's see, aquatic services, and then demand transportation are all the Marathon County specific
Okay.
services.
And then on your latest financial statement, you had where you had bad debts and administrative write-offs, as well as charity care. If you could, you spoke to charity care, but what's an administrative write-off and the bad debts?
Yep. So the bad debt would be something that we are anticipating having to write off, and then a write-off is something that is a true uncollectible debt.
Okay.
And then charity care would be if we're adjusting payment based on somebody's ability to pay, that would be the charity care.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? For North Central? What is our current level of subsidy, or? I think we've been static or declining.
Tax
We've got some debt, but our level of county levy that goes to support North Central has been flat for years.
We, in 2026, we did not request an increase. The current tax levy amount for Marathon County is $5,861,018. So about 5.8 million.
And that's for the nursing home and the other operations.
Yep, 1.5 is for Mount View, and then the rest is for the other operations.
If I can add one thing, one change we're going to make, Jason and Gary brought it to the executive committee and the committee supported it, was sometimes when you look at the financials, historically, there had been a specific allocation of county levy to specific departments or specific service lines. And while it predates me to know why that approach was taken, I don't know that it's the most transparent in terms of the financial performance of any of the individual programs, because it makes it look like certain programs are, for lack of a better term, revenue positive because they have levy associated with them, and other programs not. So Jason and Gary recommended that we do that we handle that tax levy allocation differently to provide more of a clear look at what the operating expenses and operating revenues for each of those program lines are. So we'll see what that looks like in the budget presentation. But I do think that's important, again, because when you look at the North Central financials, if you look at the executive committee packets, it'll look, hey, the adult behavioral health hospital, wow, really doing well. And it is, but if you allocate additional tax levy beyond operating expense, it overstates that positive, or at least it could be interpreted that way. I don't know if there's anything you guys want to add on that kind of philosophy change that we're going to make.
No, I mean, I think the reason for that change is really to see what is the true cost of doing business for some of these programs. We know that at the county, budgeting is getting more and more difficult. We know it's going to get more and more difficult at North Central Healthcare. Rates just aren't keeping up with expenses, and we know that we have the big beautiful bill that was recently passed, and that it will impact us. We just don't know to what extent. So really, we want to figure out what is the true cost of providing these programs and services, so that come a time where we're having some difficult conversations, or we maybe need to request additional tax levy, we really have we know that we've explored every opportunity, or we know where we need to focus our time operationally, maybe to do a better job or to perform a little bit better, so that we're not coming to request additional levy from the counties. So it's going to help us internally, but also provide the counties a better idea of what is the true operating costs of programs and services.
Jason, Gary, you mentioned the potential impacts from the federal budget. So where do you see North Central most at risk in terms of decreases in federal funding and/or modification of those that are covered by insurance going forward? And what plans do you have to try to minimize those impacts?
Yeah, we're not anticipating any decreases in 2026, but we do think our biggest challenge is going to be individuals losing coverage. I think we're going to see an increase in charity care, and I think that's going to be our biggest challenge in the future. I don't anticipate huge rate decreases, but I do think that they're going to start to level off and become stagnant long-term. But again, only time will tell with that, but it does seem that it is more difficult for individuals to get or keep health insurance, and that's where we're going to start to see individuals become uninsured.
Yeah, we know that there'll be some impacts on Medicaid, but we don't know yet exactly what those will be. So next year, especially as we move through the budget cycle next year, going to have to start looking at that for the future and looking ahead as more information comes out with that and start planning for what are we going to do. Chair, you asked, what are we doing to plan for it? It's kind of hard right now. We're trying to keep up on everything as they come and the different laws, but not everything is black and white on how these are changing yet. We aren't sure how Medicaid's going to be impacted yet. Wisconsin's in a little bit different situation than some of the other states, but because they didn't accept the increase in Medicaid, but still there might be issues with that. So that's going to be important to watch as we move into next year. So it'll be something that we're really going to have to watch and really plan for in the next budgets to come.
Supervisor, Vice Chair Marshall.
You had said that Mount View has a $1.5 million tax levy. Last year's average resident was 123. Is it fair to say that it requires a subsidy of about $12,000 per individual at Mount View? And then my follow-up question is the sale of Pinecrest have any impact on the overall financials that will require additional from Marathon County and Langlade?
Okay, the first question that you talked about on the impact, I would have to run some numbers to give that exactly to you because, we have a census of 116. So I'd have to think about that one. I couldn't give that one to you right off the top of my head as we sit here. So I apologize for that. But Pinecrest, we are looking at that now, how that impacts us. As we're going through the budget right now, it's really hard as we're putting this budget together because we haven't had a month without Pinecrest, so we're making a lot of assumptions right now. The way that impacts us is we were able to take some costs and spread it across, the organization. Pinecrest is one of those. So some of the costs are spread across the whole organization. Now Pinecrest is gone, so some of those costs are gone, but some aren't. So then those costs come back. Those indirect costs are spread out. So that is going to have an impact. So just like when North Central took on Pinecrest, that helped the other two member counties because there were expenses from the member counties that were there that got spread over Pinecrest. So that was a win for the counties. Now we're seeing it the other way now that Pinecrest is gone. Now, to what extent, we're not quite sure. Right in the middle of getting budget done, we're right at that phase right now that we're looking at that. So this year, we're going to have to make a lot of assumptions. Next year, we'll have a better picture of it because we'll have went through. We do our budget earlier than the counties do. Ours is done pretty much. We're just doing that indirect cost allocation through our budget now, and then we'll have it done and be able to present it. We have to start our budget so early. It makes it pretty difficult. We don't have a lot of the information that we need, like for health insurance and different things. At least when the county starts theirs, they at least have 6 months that they can look at to give them an idea. We have like 3, 4. So, 4 if we're lucky. So yes, we are going to have to make some assumptions. There is going to be, I can let Jason kind of cover it more too.
Yeah, strategically, when Pinecrest was taken out by North Central Healthcare, it was able to cover a lot of their indirect expenses through economies of scale. So it really helped out the organization as a whole. And by that sale, we are not able to decrease our indirect expenses by the amount that Pinecrest covered. So we have about $1.2 million of indirect expenses that we need to find in our budget in 2026. And then Pinecrest had a net income of about $500,000 last year in our budget, so it's about $1.7 million is what we're looking to cover in 2026 from the loss of Pinecrest. So the challenge that we're going to be faced with in 2026 is, financially we're doing well. Like Supervisor Leonard mentioned, the hospitals are doing well. Census is doing well. Financially, we're doing very well in 2025. But to absorb that big of a loss is going to be challenging. The real challenge is going to be really short term in 2026, because as those indirect expenses get reallocated out to programs, we will not pick those expenses up in some of our cost reports until prior years. So we might see a dip in our cash in 2026 until we play catch up with our reconciliations. So the areas that we'll see the highest additional revenue for those indirect are our CCS and WIMCR reconciliations. We should pick up some additional expenses there. And then in our hospital rate setting would be another one. But because the sale happened in 2025, we're not going to pick up the whole year. So we're still going to have that split. So in 2026, when we're doing our 2025 reconciliation, we'll pick up about half of that. And then our hospital rate setting won't pick that up until 2027 rate setting. So we're going to be a couple of years behind. So we will see, I project a small decline in cash. And we're still trying to run those numbers. Like Gary said, we haven't had a month without Pinecrest yet with our financials. So we're making some large assumptions now within our budget.
Any other questions? Gary or Jason? If not, thank you very much for coming. Are there any other questions relative to the 2026 budget? And I noticed that the counties, or the courts recently put out a updated figure relative to court costs. Do we have any idea how that might impact us?
Positively is the short answer. That was one of the few areas within the state budget that was I don't want to say a significant win, but it was certainly a positive for us. We're about halfway through our budget meetings. We still have we have the heavy hitter still to come, the sheriff's office. But in terms of the courts, that was a positive meeting in terms of what it looks like and the impact on levy. I believe it's about $20,000 per court branch that additional funding was provided. We also have, as Gary and Jason said, there's still a lot still to come relative to the federal side. The state budget is similarly that way. There was an allocation for courts that my recollection was $10 million, and any amount that remains after the initial allocation would be sent out to counties, and I assume that'll be done on a per capita basis. But we, of course, don't know how much of that 10 million is going to be left over for that secondary allocation. But all in all, our courts budget process was very positive. That's also one of the areas where we've really strive to enhance efficiency, and that's one of the areas in my memo before where I referenced a position was not going to be funded. Kudos to Kelly Schremp and working with the judges to reallocate work and not fund one of those positions moving forward in 2026.
Chair Gibbs.
Administrator, so one of the things that was talked about on the WCA call was reimbursements for qualified interpreters and whether or not counties were using unqualified interpreters, and if they're unqualified, or uncertified, I should say, not unqualified, uncertified interpreters raised to the level of 30% or more usage, then there was a reimbursement cut, if you will. Do we know what kind of interpreter, are we using qualified and certified interpreters and not rising to that level of 30%?
We only utilize within the court system certified, Wisconsin court certified interpreters. That's one of the areas actually, in speaking with Kelly, certainly Chair Gibbs is on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We had a recent presentation. Those are costs on the interpreter and translation side that have gone up substantially over the last several years. We ran a pilot with a new provider after we released an RFP some time ago. Ran a pilot within our social services department. That's gone very well. Haven't seen any impacts in terms of service. They're very responsive. Their billing is quite good in that we don't have to deal with billing issues that we had in the past. So that's going well. In speaking with Kelly, the plan is to have a pilot within the court system to move away from, or I should say to supplement our current provider for court certified interpreters. She's identified a specific court branch that she thinks would do well with that. Our hope is to control those costs. We're primarily using video for those court certified interpreters as opposed to in person, which does help control costs. But we are not, based on what I know right now, we're not in, I would say, at risk of not receiving the reimbursement or reconciliation for those costs that we incur.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I know some of the departments are working on fee increases. Will those just be incorporated in your budget, or are you looking for us to take action? I know, Kim, you've outlined a couple in the past. Do you want this committee, or is it sufficient just to have the departments bring those to you?
So the county board provided action in your budget assumption setting to set those at the presumption at a market increase consistent with the market rates for our compensation increases. We are looking at, and you brought up the county clerk's fees. There are areas where fees, kind of similar to what Jason and Gary referenced, there are areas where we can do that without negatively impacting operations. And then there are areas where the private market perhaps won't support us making those fee changes. Stated differently, for example, at the solid waste department, if we were to increase beyond what is consistent with the market rate, we may lose tonnage, which would ultimately cost us revenue and leave revenue on the table. So we're having those conversations in every budget meeting about what fees are available for increases. Some are capped by the state. We had a meeting with the Register of Deeds, again, a very positive budget meeting. Another department where we're not going to be funding one of the positions. It's a 25% of their staff. Their staff of 4 allocated positions, I'm funding 3. We have a strategy to do that. But in terms of fees, many of their fees, almost all of their fees are capped by or set by the state. So those fees aren't available. Other areas, county clerk's budget, for example, marriage licenses, Kim did some research and kind of compared Marathon County to surrounding counties and others, other comparable counties, and she's got a proposal to increase that, I think, substantially. But we're having those conversations in every budget meeting with the general presumption to be that market increase. And my goal is to bring forward a document that where we aren't increasing it at that market rate, we have at least that noted and can provide an explanation as to why.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments, or suggestions relative to the budget? We'll continue to place this item on our agenda as we work through it. I do have some questions relative to the KIP, but we'll save those for the next item. So we'll move on then to the consideration of we'll move on to the consideration of the 2026 capital improvement budget planning strategy. Administrator Leonard or Chris, I'm not sure.
Chris can walk you through this. Really dovetails nicely with the presentation you got at the full board last week.
I could come up there maybe and,
However you want to do it.
okay. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of notes before I get rolling here. There is a resolution in a packet for the project list approval, and we spoke with Corp Counsel about having that under this item, and he's fine with that. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't neglect to do that. But the 5-year plan in your packet is essentially the same as the one that was presented Thursday, but I did make a couple of adjustments based on comments and questions we had in a discussion with Chair Robinson afterward about one small part of it. Essentially, I kind of cleared up the data, tried to demarcate the first section here at the top to more clearly call that out as not being CIP funded. This is the highway projects that are funded by levy each year, and then the CWA and solid waste projects, which have their own funding mechanisms. Similarly, toward the bottom, I provided a couple totals just because there's placeholder projects in there, like the ice arena with different options there with different money amounts. So I wanted to kind of carve those out so that they didn't distort that initial bottom line as much. This year here, you see that it looks like $46 million is coming up, but it's really, that's $34 million associated with different options for the ice arena. So once you back it all out, you get closer to 17 there. And then this 10 million is a radio towers project that the sheriff's office will be bringing forward in the near future. That's a very high level estimate we got from them based on previous costs. And then lastly, the only change I made, which can be backed out again, is that with the rolling stock policy in place, the CPI calculation that you do was based on the policy came to a 4.48% increase. So when I looked at the rolling stock amounts, I changed the numbers here, in this column here to reflect that increase. Whereas on Thursday, I had backed it out to just have 2025 numbers. Really at this point, it's just educational or illustrative of either approach, 2026 with the increase or not. But the other things just to note is that the annual playground replacement, that was a 10-year plan, so that's why there's no funding for that allocated. Then the jail intercom system, which I spoke to a bit on last Thursday, that is one that when we got into it and learned from IT and others, there was more pieces to just the intercoms themselves. So not having anybody with in-house expertise that knew how to look at that system overall, we needed to hire out somebody to provide a design that would link each constituent part of the system as they all work with each other and make the jail doors and intercom function. That design is underway, and we'll bring back, at the completion of that, we'll bring back a much more focused number in terms of how much that project is slated to cost. There is just shy of $250,000 that was allocated this year toward that project. And in speaking with Jerry, Director of IT, the software replacement line here for $150,000, this was something he had added to the 5-year plan because CCITC runs into general software updates just across departments in the county. each year. So that was a number that would allow CCITC to keep up with those replacements. And it's our opinion that this amount would go toward the jail intercom project. And it does involve a software replacement as well. So that helps in terms of the bottom line number we're looking at, which went up a little bit with the rolling stock increase. As you'll note, all the projects were not highway road projects or CCITC or rolling stock are zeroed out and deferred. And I moved them to 2026 and color coded them to show the amount just so we knew what that looked like. And then I tallied up what that deferred total was also at the bottom. Now, putting them into 2027, I should say, does not mean that they're going to happen in 2027, because in my opinion, at this point, once we get through this year's budget process and see how things shake out, we'll have to go back through what was slated for 27 and then what is being deferred, and then reshuffle the deck to get the 5-year plan in a place that, doesn't have everything coming the following year. And that'll just be discussions about where exactly are pieces of equipment at. Can you try to stretch it another year? Which ones are higher risk or have a higher risk of failing based on their life expectancy and things like that. Lastly, the highway facility project has been in the plan and continues to be. I highlighted out here as a to be determined because that project is in motion. It's still a potential project in terms of where it's at. The first part is design and getting a schematic design really so that you can look at the site and have a site plan based on the parcels that the county's purchased to look at doing that. So I did note that there's a percentage fee. That is the real world percentage based on the RFP responses we received. The construction amount, again, will come into greater focus once you bring in the construction manager at risk, which will be another RFP we do at a similarly low expense overall to get to a point where you have a cost estimation that's based on what that construction manager is seeing in real time versus sort of a high level estimate based on conceptual designs. That's the long and short of it. The number right now is just over 4.5 million. The lion's share of that is wrapped up in highway road projects and rolling stock. So the rolling stock, again, I mentioned on Thursday, we're contractually bound for the sheriff's office current fleet, adding nothing, and the CPZ and facilities fleets, again, adding nothing. So if we went back to 25 numbers, you would meet that contractual obligation. If we stuck with the policy, then the numbers you see in this document now would be adding that percentage increase. In terms of funding these projects, that's the challenge in terms of having no funding for the CIP rollover. It's, and I mentioned on Thursday, it can be a number of different strategies in terms of how we look at funding existing debt. There are other things out there such as current projects that haven't closed out yet, but we can get a bead on where they're at, when are they closing, what's their budget look like now, what do they anticipate as future costs between now and closeout. So you get a sense of what funds would be available there. And a chunk of those too are ARPA funded projects. And so if there's ARPA funds that have been allocated to a project that will be closing out, those projects and the funding associated with them was encumbered or contracted, essentially locked up per the Treasury guidance by the deadline last year. And any remaining funds that come out of those projects, per the Treasury's guidance, can be reallocated to another eligible project, but would still need to be expensed by the end of 2026. So those are some of the options. In my presentation, if you recall, there were some traditional event options in terms of levy and borrowing, things like that, and non-traditional as well. So I think it's sort of bringing this to you to discuss what those options look like, sort of where the committee is, what the committee is thinking about any of it. And then just to close, I'll say that what's before you now is really sort of that baseline from our opinion in terms of what should we try to be funding here, and that's the highway projects to protect the GTA funding, the IT projects to keep us where we need to be with cybersecurity, access and whatnot, and then rolling stock, there's a couple different options there.
If I can just add, that's what to go over what the resolution in your packet is. Excuse me, it really does. It's approving the project list. We still need to further develop the funding. But Chris stripped out, excuse me, everything that we didn't identify as kind of mission critical, based on the lack of funding. If there are other projects you want to add to that list, please let us know. But those are the things that, again, GTA, we have to protect GTA, so the highway projects are funded. Thank you, the IT projects, and then rolling stock. Those are the things, kind of those core functions we need to make sure we continue to do to deliver services. The rest of the projects, at least in our estimation, are suitable for kind of reshuffling the deck, to borrow Chris's terminology, as part of that long-term 5-year plan. But if there are things that this committee wants us to tackle that we have not identified as things that we need to fund in '26, we'd appreciate that guidance now. But we did, and we stripped out everything that, again, wasn't that mission critical.
All right, any questions? First of all, thank you for making that modification of the rolling stock. We had spent a lot of time trying to update our rolling stock policy to make sure that we could minimally keep pace with inflation. And I think that taking a step back would not be in the county's long-term interest, because you impact the base going forward. So I appreciate that change. And just as an aside, we have had numerous discussions, and I think that there will be a need for both infrastructure and this committee to weigh in relative to the allocation of highway reserves for the new building, whether it's for the design work. We've been doing that relative to the acquisition costs, but as we get into some of the work on that, so we'll try to do that sometime this fall when it's timely. But again, it will be an effort with both infrastructure and this committee relative to the use of those and commitment of those reserves. We'll deal with those to be determined numbers that are in the capital improvement plan for next year.
And just to be very clear, Chris said that project is not funded in that $4.5 million number. So that is specifically teed up for infrastructure in this committee as a separate determination. My understanding is Chris, Sam, and the staff from Highway are hoping to make a presentation infrastructure at its next meeting.
So any other questions for administration? If not, what are yours, Chair Gibbs?
Just one. I know, Chris, I totally appreciate the work that you've done to coordinate with the funding availability or the lack thereof. But one of the concerns that I have is pushing off some of these end-of-life maintenance issues. And we know historically that got us into some really challenging positions in the past and added to cost in some cases when we didn't do those because we didn't have funding. And it led to the county board taking an approach several years ago where we actually went out and borrowed the funds to in fact do some of those projects that were put off, that added costs. So is there anything that you're seeing that's in the end of life and the CIP projects that are being pushed off into the 2027 that are potentially going to lead to some of that type of same situation where we're saving the dollars today, however, it's going to add to us in costs in the future?
It's a good question, and I've given this a lot of thought, actually. And I've got a planning meeting this week with facilities staff to ask them some of these questions as well, because, on the one hand, there's the ability to say, okay, we're going to defer these, and then if something were to happen, then we'd have contingency we could come back for. But that being said, the question I'm going to have specifically on the HVAC front, or sort of the replacing the air handler unit and the chiller, is that something that if it failed and the time it would take to either fix or try to fix or replace it, does that then have a ripple effect through jail operations where now you have to move people because now they can't be in that part of the jail because the air is not suitable? So I'm going to get some better detail on that particular question in terms of, in your point of impact. I think some of them are not as drastic to push off from a facilities point of view, I should say. You have a similar issue with the ice arena and that the ice arena cooling tower had been pulled out. That was something that had been discussed as part of the repairs and moving forward, but there's also going to be a larger discussion around the ice arena coming through the committees and the board soon as well. So that may be fleshed out in a suitable time frame that we have a clearer answer on that prior to budget adoption. Not that I want to foist amendments on anybody on the board, but in terms of highway projects, those are all pretty clear. Jerry would probably have a better sense of which of the IT projects would have an impact and what those impacts would be. I know that a couple of them were not funded by the city and they were sort of joint projects, so it was a county share, so they were pulled. I did move those out of 26 and just put them into 27 as a future year in case we came back and the city and the county had funding for those. But I'm trying to see where that was. But you've got like the assembly room programming replacement. This is working in the other direction. I don't know if that's something that is going to cause the mics or the room not to work or if you can put it off. But fundamentally, to answer your question, I think that you will incur a greater cost just by virtue of the market increase year to year. So that's without a doubt going to happen to anything you defer. The juvenile facilities exterior, we've deferred that for 3 years, and that cost continue to go up each year. The sanitary sewer replacement at the Lakeview Professional Plaza, that one's a challenging project, but certainly it's complicated enough that you would see the cost go up, and really the impact of the county would be that those spaces, you would want to minimize its use. So if there was an opportunity to say some outside firm wanted a lease space, that we would take that off the table for now until we resolve that. But I can come back to the committee and Administrator Leonard with more clear details on like the annex roof replacement for the courthouse or the air handler 9 and 10, designing it 1 year and replacing it the following year. Those costs will go up by virtue of where they are in the calendar in terms of the new refrigerant that's in play now. Those projects will go up 10 to 20% just by virtue of the new EPA regulations than what we were previously anticipating. But yeah, the elevator modernization one, that's another one that's on my radar, but we handled 3 of them this year. We've done some juggling, so I feel okay about that one. The only one was giving us issues previously is at the library, but that one seems to have been sorted out long ago and hasn't reared its ugly head again. So on the whole, I think some of these would be fine to defer outside of the increase in the cost. I am going to dig into a couple of the others just for the ripple effect I mentioned before.
Any other questions? If not, what are the wishes of the committee? This is on for action, recommending it, the revised numbers to the county board tonight pursuant to the resolution. Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion to approve the 2026 capital improvement program project list.
Seconded by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the 2026 capital improvement program project list signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. We should have had an item 5 in here, which was a denial of the claim. It made it in the packet, but it didn't make it on the agenda, so we will take that up at the next meeting. So next will be a 5B, resolution calling for the state of Wisconsin to provide funding to counties to support required additional administrative income maintenance program functions. And just as an intro, Wisconsin is one of 10 states across the country where the counties administer the income maintenance, SNAP eligibility, and other programs. So some of the federal changes have a very real impact on us directly. With that, Administrator Leonard.
Thank you. Perfectly teed up. This is something that the Wisconsin Counties Association provided a informational presentation on one of their weekly calls, and there is a draft resolution that is tailored to Marathon County that was provided by the Wisconsin Counties Association. It's on page 69 of your packet. But in short, there are some ancillary impacts, as Chair Robinson referenced, as a result of federal action, federal legislation. One of the areas is in terms of our eligibility screening, moving from, this is just one example, but moving from a annual reevaluation to a twice a year reevaluation. So just an increased workload. The reason there's a request for funding is because if there are performance standards for this program, and if individual counties don't meet those performance standards, there are some fiscal penalties relative to reimbursement for the program. So the Counties Association is asking all counties to consider authoring a resolution to call upon increased support from the state of Wisconsin to ensure that we have sufficient staffing to administer the program, consistent with the action at the federal level.
Are there any questions? And again, if we were in one of those other 40 states, the state would be picking up those costs. And I think that's what we're looking to try to do, encourage the Wisconsin legislature to do. Ultimately, it's their decision. So are there any questions? Now, what are your wishes? Supervisor Hart.
I'll make a motion that we move the resolution to the full county board for consideration.
Is there a second? Seconded by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion? If not, Supervisor Poole?
I will abstain on this one.
Okay, Supervisor Poole will abstain. Any other discussion? If not, all of those in favor of adoption of the resolution will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously with the abstention, so, thank you. Moving on to 6A, review the strategic plan. I was just going through the strategic plan.
You have 6B.
Yep.
Or you have 5B.
Consideration.
Or five, okay, I'm
5B2.
sorry, I'm jumping ahead. We'll go to consideration of authorized sale of real property at 529 McClellan Street in Wausau by auction. We have an appraisal.
Correct.
Chair
So
Leonard.
just for a little bit of history, this is a parcel that was transferred to North Central Healthcare a number of years ago. It's the former site of an adult housing unit. The Randlin Homes facility was on that site. It's of course since been razed, but North Central Healthcare that property was transferred to North Central Healthcare, of course. North Central Healthcare is not interested in maintaining that property and actually can't hold property pursuant to its agreement. So it was transferred to Marathon County with the understanding that any proceeds from the sale, consistent with some of the other sales property sales that we've overseen recently, that those proceeds would be put towards North Central Healthcare's ongoing debt obligations. The appraisal report is in your packet with the appraisal dollar amount of, I believe it's $10,800 was the appraisal amount. The recommendation from staff would be to handle it consistent with some of the recent sales we've had, that is to list it on Wisconsin Surplus and allow that auction to take place, again, with the understanding that any proceeds from the sale would be held for use to ensure that North Central Healthcare can meet its debt service obligation.
Any questions? If not, what are the wishes of the committee? Supervisor Poole.
I'll move to authorize sale of real property at 529 McClellan Street in Wausau by auction.
So moved by Supervisor Poole, is there a second? Seconded by Vice Chair Marshall. Is that, or Supervisor Lemmer? All blended together. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of that motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. All right, now we'll go on to educational presentations and committee discussion. It used to be that we would look at the strategic plan on a regular basis, and I just went in and trying to prep for the budget and then came across a couple of things, but we don't have primary responsibility for many of the objectives and goals. In the plan, we have a secondary role in particularly making sure that we're providing services in a cost-effective manner, whether it's public safety or other services. And there are a number of other activities that we can do, but I don't think that it hurts for us. And again, we used to spend a lot of time just going through and checking in on activities, but I'd like to particularly draw your attention to item objective 12.3, which is provide cost-effective and high-quality public services. And one of the concerns that we had was reduce and maintain the county employee resignation turnover rate at 15% in there. And we were also looking at, as part of that, implementing the comp plan, the compensation plan, and funding it as part of that effort to try to reduce turnover and vacancy rates in the county. Administrator Leonard, is there anything that you wanted to highlight in there?
No, other than I appreciate the direction at your last meeting, and much of our budget meetings to this point have been focused on the need to find funding to ensure that we're able to do that and accomplish the strategy that was added by the county board. Have a sound strategy to maintain our staff, and I want to give kudos to to this committee for providing that direction, but department heads, just to let you know, to this point, have really done an exceptional job. Shared sacrifice is a term that I've used in every one of those meetings, and the team understands that and are working hard to be as efficient as possible and innovative in their approaches. We just had our meeting with social services. A combination of strategies that are indicative of the rest of the departments, but whether it's not filling positions and then trying to be innovative in how we assign work, but also you saw the presentation relative to our Family Keys strategy at the full board. We're bringing forward another delivery model change, what I call a delivery model change for services within social services right now using external sources, contractual sources. We believe we can do it more efficiently at a higher level for less cost. And that's another about $100,000 savings. So we're really, as a team, striving to implement those things, implement those strategies to make the budget work, because as both Jason and Gary referenced with their budget and Chris referenced as it relates to the capital improvement program, the team is up to the task, and we'll deliver a budget that provides all of the services to the greatest extent possible without making changes in service level given our fiscal constraints. But nothing I have to add substantively. Happy to answer any questions if you have them on the strategic plan.
Just as an aside, looking at strategy A and D, we're talking about addressing solid waste management on a regional basis and looking for ways to cooperate with joint facility arrangements. We've started that process with the reverse osmosis, or we're about to start that with the reverse osmosis system at the solid waste site, and hopefully we can have a joint venture agreement come in with those other interested counties, Portage and Shawanoe or Lincoln, going forward. But again, our plan If you look at strategy E, the dashboards, we've talked about those, and perhaps after the budget is developed, we can get another update on where we are with our, with the dashboards. But then strategy E is relative to funding the employee compensation plans. And policies, which again, we took action on the policies relative to vacation days and hours of operation. And the compensation study last month. And so those don't come out of nowhere. They come out of, the strategic plan that tries to drive our operations in the county administrator's work plan. That's why we put it together, and the county's in the process of updating the long-term comprehensive plan, which will then result in modifications and revisiting and developing new goals, objectives, strategies for the strategic plan going forward. Again, just for, more or less for education. Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When was the last time, or when has the county ever done a employee satisfaction survey? I can't imagine, retaining staff by just looking at monetary. Does it make sense to survey them? I mean, working in government right now is a little tricky, and I don't know if that fits, but it just seems like putting money at something and not really knowing why people are leaving, other than the exit strategies that you have with just people leaving and not with people who are remaining here.
Short answer, yes, we've historically done a culture survey. It's been a while. That was one of the things that during the pandemic, we just didn't have resources to continue that, and utilizing, the way we did it in the past was through the use of an external consultant. We have talked internally about, hey, how do we do that differently? I think in a more targeted way to get at some of the information you're talking about. And we've, whether it's Molly or myself or others have talked to their colleagues. I mean, our previous survey was the Denison Culture Survey, which is, I want to say, about 60 multiple choice questions and had some open-ended questions. Required a great deal of consultant outside assistance to compile those results. Then a lot of internal staff time to action plan around the results. And we've, I think, have a very strong history going back 15 years of using that data to make informed decisions about how to enhance services and enhance their working environment. That said, that's a lot of bandwidth that, quite honestly, we don't have anymore. We'd need to add multiple positions to do that. And I would candidly tell you, we can find a way to do that better. We've talked about pulse surveys, kind of shorter, more frequent surveys around targeted topics. But yeah, short answer, certainly we want to make sure we do that. But right now you have a lot of higher priority things. We need to do that. And we continue to engage in strategies. I know through our Imagine Day, our on-site training day, Molly has delivered a number of trainings. Other staff have delivered trainings to try to offer that professional development, which is a big component of it. We also, 2 years ago, held diagonal slice meetings where we combined, we had groups of staff from across the organization, different departments, different levels of staff, and had open dialogues about, hey, what does it mean to work here? What's going well? What are some areas of opportunity? We also do, one of the things that came out of the culture survey in the past was what we term as a rounding initiative, where department leaders, managers, and ultimately department heads and myself meet with staff to go through. It's kind of the flip side of performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is where the manager, department head, makes clear to staff, hey, these are the things I need from you. These are my expectations. Rounding allows the opportunity for staff to convey to their leader or manager, hey, what's working well? What are some areas where they perhaps need some additional support? One of the questions I like to ask is, hey, is there anyone on your team or throughout our organization that's doing an exceptional job that we should recognize, even if it's something as simple as an email or a call? So you're right, there needs to be a broader strategy than just compensation and benefit analysis. Getting that moving to a pulse survey, I think, is the future of what we want that to look like. And finding a way that where people feel as though they can be as candid as they can, because sometimes survey data is not the greatest mechanism to get information, but while also offering the opportunity, continued opportunity for individual staff to meet with their supervisor and have a different conversation than the performance management conversation. I hope that gets to your point.
Other questions? All right. If not, next we'll have an update from the Human Resources Department, including a review of the compensation. Before we get into that, this will be Molly's last meeting with us. I want to, again, I did it at the county board meeting, but I want to do it again here and thank her for her years of service to the county and the leadership and walking us through a painful but successful transition to a new HR platform with work ongoing, but helping us deal with the issue of retention and recruitment in a changing environment and refining and updating personnel policies and procedures to make us a better place to work and hopefully more attractive place to work. So Molly, on behalf of myself and I'm sure the committee, I want to thank you for your service and wish you well in your new position. And you don't have to be a stranger. You're staying in the community and we wish you the best going forward.
Thank you. All right, well, with that, I will give a brief update of what's keeping the HR department busy, and then I'll hand it over to Lance to walk through the compensation information. Again, we are busy with employment transactions. We've hired 179 employees so far this year, separated with 176, so that turnover is kind of continuous, although we are currently in transition with our seasonals. Our summer seasonals are falling off, and we are recruiting for those fall and winter, so kind of swapping lifeguards for tow rope operators at the moment. We currently have 43 open job requisitions to fill 82 vacancies. 44 of those, however, are those seasonal positions that we are looking to fill. However, 2 of those vacancies are department head level recruitments, my own and the Corporation Council. So with that, I am working on my departure plan and transitioning within my department, making sure that my staff has what they need to keep HR functioning. We are still in the process of outsourcing our leave management after the departure earlier this month of our senior HR analyst who handled all of that in-house. And today we actually conducted our third quarter loss control visit with our safety coordinators out at the parks and highway departments, observing their work to ensure safe practices and equipment utilization. Those visits went very, very well. Any questions?
Included in there was the final report from the compensation consultant. Is there anything that you'd like to offer in addition to what was offered at the last meeting?
I think Lance was maybe going to walk through some of that, but I will say that, personally working through to get us in a good position, because implementation will, of course, happen after my departure.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, there was a request to put that in the packet, and we certainly did it. Really, not going to go through it. It's the same thing she told you orally. She just didn't have it to us. But also in your packet is the 2 wage grids. One is the future anticipated, just listing what we anticipate 2026 to be. And then there's also a comparison to see the ranges that the consultant moved. And then she also had some position moves. But nothing substantive to add, but I would be remiss if I didn't echo Chair Robinson's point with the assistance that Molly's provided during her time with the county, but both before serving as HR director, but also certainly as HR director. To say that she led the transition of our previous HR system to Workday is a bit not overly clear, we didn't have one before. So we had spreadsheets and a very disjointed system. Molly, my analogy is she built a car in a garage, and it's no small undertaking trying to bring that together. We did more comp grade updates under Molly's tenure than we had in the previous, it's been about 15 years to get our last two. So she's really done well to kind of keep this in front of us to help on that front. Done a ton, as this committee knows, with respect to our on-site clinic and our previous relationship. I think we're in a much better place. Still need to make improvements there, of course, and there's a lot of opportunity. But apart from those things, on the performance management front, I've sat through her performance management training. It's exceptional. We're going to have her record one before she leaves. It's really been a pleasure to work with her, and she's going to be missed. But as Chair Robinson referenced, she's going to be local and be a great asset for a local employer. So certainly wishing her well. And with that, I can answer any questions as to process on the other two items. But you heard this spiel before. We just put in the packet the things that Milena told you.
So Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Previously, we had approved any grade changes. Are we going to get some explanation, or we're on, I bet that there's probably close to 20 different grade changes?
Sure, if you want explanations, the short explanation is those were things that Milena recommended based on market moves. So there are some, if there's a reclassification request that a department has, we have a process for that when the job changes. This is a market-driven analysis. So she's saying the market, for example, for, highway commissioner, because we just did that recruitment, that moved a grade. It not only shifted, but it moved a grade because the market for highway commissioners is such that our grade itself was inappropriate. So this is not a reclassification when it's the job of pick a position is fundamentally changed. It's the market. These are market-driven changes that Milena looked at.
You had referenced 176 separations. How many of those were voluntary versus involuntary?
I don't have that number right in front of me, but I can certainly provide it. Just look it up.
How does that compare to historic trends, offhand?
I don't.
All right. I just, I did some, quick runs, but it looks like when you look at the numbers relative to the class compensation, it looks like generally we were 11, 12% below the minimum. And when you look at the market, we were about 10% below. And then on the maximum side, we were generally about 8% below where the market was. And we tend not to recruit at the maximum. We tend to recruit at either minimum or market, I would assume. And I think that's why it's important for us to make sure that we're adjusting those on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's right. I can clarify that our process is to hire new employees in at that minimum rate. We do allow for some movement through the scale based on years of experience in the same or very similar role, perhaps at another county or an organization where it's similar, up to that market rate. It is very rare that anybody would be hired in above that market rate. It does require several layers of approval in order to do that. So yes, typically at the minimum, in some instances, minimum to market, but rarely market or above.
And with respect to process, I think moving forward, based on the conversation we had at this committee, we would be well served to have that conversation about range shifts every year, which is consistent with what Milena's recommendation was, to talk about how do we implement a structured range to move individuals through the range, but then also not get into a position where it's been 3 or 4 high years of general inflation where your scale then becomes outdated, because it does impact your ability to, as Molly said, not only retain, but also when you're bringing people into the organization, you want to be able to bring them in at those lower steps when your lower portions of the ranges are not usable or not viable. It does impact your ability to recruit. And I did just pull up in the budget, just for context in terms of new employees hired. You can kind of get some context as to what that historical movement has looked like. And again, as Molly's explained in previous meetings, we have a lot of peaks throughout the annual process. Those are generally our summer seasonals, which if you want to see a lot of busy HR people, come over when they're doing recruiting for summer seasonal work, whether it's lifeguards and pool concessions people and people cutting grass, but it is a busy time in the HR office.
I did just pull those numbers on voluntary versus involuntary. 81 of those separations were involuntary. However, that does include when a job assignment ends. So a seasonal or limited term employee leaving at the end of their job assignment does get included. 6 of those were terminations. The rest were job assignments ending. So that remaining 99 were voluntary separations.
Any other questions of Molly and/or Administrator Leonard? All right, if not, our next meeting is September 10th at 3. Do you have any items for that? We're continuing to work on the budget. We'll get a little bit more clarity and the process continues. Again, we're shooting for the end of September for the unveiling of the budget. Vice Chair Marshall.
Just wondering if we're, the health insurance timeline, I know in the past we would bring the broker in and he would give us kind of, I didn't know if that's going to fit in the next month or if you're going to be able to pull the budget together before we have a chance to meet with that person.
We don't have a quote from GHT for, I don't know if you guys want to give an update.
No, I think that is the update, is that we have not received a renewal at this point. I did follow up just today, and they were hoping to have something by the end of the week. However, I also got that same response last week, so.
And we do have our Molly's been in contact with our brokers, so they've given us what we believe we should anticipate, which we provided to this committee through the budget assumption process.
I guess is the broker shopping or are we just going with only one choice? Would be my question.
We didn't put out an RFP for additional health providers. So right now it's GHT to get their renewal, and then based on the discussion that this committee and the direction you provided about how to manage increases to come in, to not put additional pressure on the levy was, in terms of budget priorities and budget assumptions, the assumption built in was a 6.5% number that Sam has built into all the payroll calculations. But in terms of budget priorities to administration and what to prioritize, my recollection is that is number 3. So should our quote from GHT come in where we can't manage that cost through a split that maintains, that is workable within the budget, we fully anticipate if that isn't the case, we'll have to make plan design changes. I don't know if you guys want to view it
Just for
differently.
the open meetings law purposes, we are back to the discussion of the 2026 budget. So we're consistent with the open meetings law.
Then
Correct, Mike?
just would like I have not seen the RFP on the dorms. I believe that was, and I could have missed it.
It hasn't gone out yet. It's being finalized. Chris and his team just took a look at it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I keep straying from open meetings, though. We can give an update on that and the additional RFPs that we hope to have done by the end of the year at your next meeting.
Other items that you'd like to see at future meetings? If not, we are down to item 8. Chair Gibbs moves to adjourn. Seconded by Vice Chair Marshall. All those in favor of adjourning will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned. Molly, you should come more often. We're done early.